Peace upon you. It is I again, here to answer your questions. 14-year-old Felicia asks, "Hi there, Ray. A few days ago, someone used the word capitalism. I'm really curious to understand what it is, and I couldn't find anything about it on the new web. Capitalism was a critical phase in our evolution. Without the technological and scientific revelations that era provided, I wouldn't be able to share with you my thoughts today. Felicia wouldn't be able to ask her question. I wouldn't be able to raise crops underground, and I wouldn't have medicine to cure myself when severe illness strikes. And yet, this period that brought us so much eventually collapsed." To truly understand capitalism, we must understand where it came from. What was there to begin with? So, to start off, today we all have crops in our backyard, right? If I'm hungry, I can go right outside my house, pick some vegetables and make a salad. Now, some of you may still be amazed at the fact that this wasn't always the case. We must understand that during a major part of our history, people did not grow their own food. So how did they eat? Way before capitalism, people actually randomly picked and gathered whatever they came across. Hunter-gatherers, we call them today. They were not aware of the possibility of planting seeds or any other agricultural wonder. So whoever found food survived. Later on, the pre-economists discovered the power of planting seeds along with the breeding of livestock. Yes, I can see everyone asking, what is this? Well, that's an animal called a cow. It still exists today in free zones or in nature, as the economists would have called it, but in very small numbers. In the capitalistic era, its numbers far exceeded that of humans. The evolution of technology and the Industrial Revolution made it possible to grow huge amounts of food in concentrated areas. So it was only logical and more efficient and convenient to do it in a centralized way. Thus, several farmers grew food for the rest of the people. But how or why should people give away food to others? Why not? I see someone writing here. Well, you see, before capitalism, overcoming shortages was the biggest issue. People were actually dying from hunger. Humans found a way to defeat this phenomenon, but people still expected something in return for their crops. So it basically worked like this. Each person had a particular skill. He mastered it and worked in it and was able to exchange his skill and products for food. But what if the food holder didn't need his services or goods? That's where money came in. Money started as means of communication, exactly as it is today. If the food owner didn't really need the services, I could give it to someone else, earn money, and then pay for my food. The same happened with medicine, housing, and practically every skill or piece of technology that was developed. To demonstrate this, you must understand what money meant back then. You must understand that without it, people couldn't have put food on their tables. Money meant survival. That's how central it became. And so the more important it became, the more people wanted more and more of it. Humans started to concentrate less on survival skills and more on money making. These are pictures from the late economic period. This was called a supermarket. People visited this food festival every week, every day even, and bought whatever they liked. And it wasn't only food that was celebrated there. All kinds of goods were arranged and bought in the same manner. Compared to the lack of food, medicine, and shelter people have experienced in the past, this solved the problem. But there was still one catch. In order to buy food, you had to earn money. We got here an interesting question from Dillenberg. Couldn't people who didn't have money start growing food on their own land? That's very interesting, right? Because you would have thought that supermarkets would be a bonus. But understand this, at that stage in time, most people had no clue about growing food. Humanity did, but individuals didn't. And even if people did, most of them lived in one of these. That was called a building or a house. So people, of course, wanted to make more money. This was their insurance, not only for survival, but for acquiring everything. It's no wonder that supermarkets became bigger and more vast in numbers. This wonder called supermarket required much manpower to sustain. People who transport the food from the suppliers, people who stock the shelves, cleaners, a CEO, a manager, a vice manager, add that to the vast numbers of factory land workers who package the food, and the fleet of designers and studios that work to make the food more appealing, the packaging. This might have made sense when businesses created amounts of products that people actually needed. But gradually, this was far from being the case. Just to give you an idea of the quantities we're talking about here, at a certain point, humans were making food for 10 billion people, while there were only 7 billion souls to eat it. The average number of working hours per day in the late economic period was 10 full hours. Free time was a luxury. If you look at the archive researchers from that time, you would be amazed at the small percentage of people testifying that they enjoyed their work. Can you imagine spending 10 hours of your day practicing something you don't like? Let's hear a question. If people weren't happy, why didn't they just stop the growth? Well, capitalism without growth wasn't capitalism. If a man from the capitalistic period wanted to go off-grid, he would have bumped into another trouble. Again, to give you an idea, many governments didn't allow people to collect water. Why? It's bad for the economy. Why is that? Because it means that this water wasn't being worked for and thus it wasn't paid for. Up until a very late period in the capitalistic era, cars were running on fuel, petrol, gasoline. Why? The economy. So people were free up to the point where it involved stopping the flow of money. We've got a question from Lydia. But I don't understand. Is that what the authorities wanted for their citizens? From an economic perspective, yes. Authorities couldn't afford people questioning the economic mechanism as it was based upon their labor. From the day you were born, this was the only option presented to you. Each human being was specialized in a very specific field. People became experts in performing their role in the system up to the point that they became ignorant of the idea of self-reliance. Governments were competing between themselves on who's making more money. A term called the GDP was gradually used by almost every country on earth to measure its success. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product, which indicated the financial worth of products and services a country made in 1 year. Increasing their GDP was a country's #1 aspiration. Today, most of our money is a real thing, a tangible thing. It is a real and visible entity. And this was the case when human beings began to use money. But at a certain point, people's belief and needs in money was so strong that their greatest aspiration was to gain as much money as they could. To get money, you had to give something in return. Property, working hours, food. But people's aspirations and demands for wealth became so strong that they had to invent a method to gain more money than the tangible amount that actually existed. And this is where credit came in. Credit was the human invention to use money that doesn't really exist. Now you must wonder, how can one use anything that doesn't exist? One of the biggest differences of humans over other species is the ability to cooperate in large numbers. When a large group of people believes in something, a concept, a god, a word, it has the same validity for them as a real, tangible thing. You see, money couldn't have existed in the first place if the majority of people didn't believe in it and trusted that it can represent property, food, and other goods. Credit is only the next step in which money need not be tangible anymore for people to believe in it and use it. With imaginary money, people were able to buy more things, produce infinite amount of products, and gain more and more of that imaginary money. Quick question from Decker. So didn't the money represent anything? I don't understand how they could trade and use money that had no cover in reality. Decker, I understand why you're confused. Imaginary money covered imaginary products, or to be more precise, it covered future products, products that do not yet exist. Credit was actually a loan from the future. So if you got credit, it was a promise that you had to keep. The promise is that with the imaginary money you got, you'll be able to produce future products and services. You'll sell these products and get more money than you got in the first place, and would thus be able to pay interest to the bank. The bank that gave you the credit had to believe in your ability to do so. That is how the money out of nothing that we called credit worked, and if you delivered, the bank trusted you even more and gave you even more credit. Credits were getting bigger, which meant that the promises people gave for the future production got bigger. And guess who paid the biggest price? Products could not be produced out of imaginary resources. It was only the money that wasn't real. Resources were real, and they were brutally used in the service of keeping the economist's promise, the economist's belief in capital. When everyone was so hooked on money, they compromised everything. They compromised their own freedom, the education of their children, their values. Their last concern was taking care of their natural surroundings. When people are not free to do whatever they want, they lack the control over their surroundings. This is a sure recipe for the collapse of their society. This collapse came very quickly, for the economists couldn't hold their promises any longer. The earth couldn't endure it any longer. Until next time, peace.